Hello and welcome to the first of the online season for the London Cello Society. And I have to say we're hosted by my luthier here in Smithfield in their very lovely showroom. So many thanks to Pedro Silva and also to Ariel Lang for hosting this session and providing us with all their advanced video equipment. Today's session is all about warming up. And I'm absolutely delighted to see Guy Johnston back in the UK. He's been teaching in Rochester at the Eastman School of Music, and now he's back in full swing. He'll be teaching at the Royal Academy of Music. He'll be teaching at the Yehudi Menuhin School. He also is the president of ESTA. He does music at Minton, and you have your own festival at Hatfield House. So you come back to a full diary of engagements and teaching, and I have to say you are an essential part of English music making, and it's just wonderful to have you back, Guy.
Oh, thank you.
Really wonderful.
Thank you.
So when we had a prior chat about warming up, we met for a curry, as cellists do.
That's a good way to warm up.
Yeah, exactly. And I was quite surprised, really, when you told me one of the most essential parts of your day is warming up and having this period when you don't think specifically about one piece of music. You think about, and that to me, I thought, oh, well, you've got a concerto coming up. What you'll be doing is grabbing out the Walton concerto and furiously practicing that. But you said this is the most important part of your day. I find that really fascinating. So if I was to ask you if you had an ideal day where you had no distractions, you had no teaching, you had no concertos, no recitals to do, how would you organize your day in terms of your ideal relationship with the cello across a day?
Yeah, I think it's really I think I said the golden hour.
Yes.
It's like an insurance policy for the day-to-day upkeep. And I think that to have at least that 1 hour where you can dedicate it to honing in on technical aspects and developing good habits that will serve you for whatever you do for the rest of the day. And as you say, if it's an ideal day, like you have the whole day ahead of you, then you don't need to feel that you limit yourself to how much time you warm up. You just do what you need to do to feel that you are embodying the sound, the instrument, that you become one. And some days it can happen very quickly, and other days it feels like a struggle.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that I love that moment in the day, in the morning, where you just it's not even thinking about the pressures of a concert or what you have right ahead of you. It's just in the moment. It's almost like a meditation. It's something that you it's a ritual.
You told me that you warm up physically even before you get to the cello. So you like to go running. And are you thinking about your playing and what you want to achieve during the day while you run? You're thinking about your cello playing before you even sit behind it.
I mean, certainly ideas come to you when you're running or cycling. I find when I'm when I'm not in that routine of exercising, when I come back to it and I realize how powerful it is for the mind, for you to almost get a perspective, get out, get moved. And movement is so important, because if we're just waking up and we're having our breakfast and getting to the instrument, then you haven't quite freed up.
Yes.
So I find that's very useful, because after all, playing the cello is no joke, as Casal says. That there's a stamina, there's a kind of an energy, an exertion that you need to put into the instrument, but we need to find the most economical means, and fluid and elastic, strong, supple. There's always these contrasts of there's resistance, but there's also release. There's tension, there's release. So yeah, and the instrument itself has that. With the pressure on the bridge and the tension in the bow. But there's also buoyancy, and there's bounce. And so in ourselves as well, in the joints, in our joints and in our, how we're made, it goes hand in hand really. Everything's connected. So I'm trying to, we're talking to each other as we warm up, and yeah.
So this ideal day, which never exists probably, you go into your studio.
Yeah.
Would you like to just talk us through the little exercises you start with? How do you start your practice?
Well, I like what you said the other day, because apparently Pleath said that the minute you even start tuning, you're making music.
Yes.
So we've got to remember that when we're warming up, it's not like we're just drilling. We're actually trying to, start feeling as well as, like emotionally, as well as, feeling technically and the connection. So even the idea of tuning, that you're awakening, you're listening, and the resonance of the instrument. And of course, your phone goes, and suddenly a message pops up, and what you're trying to do is put all that to one side. You've got to put everything away, and if you're thinking of things, which inevitably will happen, you write them down in a notepad, and you'll come back to them. So the point is, we're trying to get this kind of meditative state where we can really concentrate on what we're doing. And I always start with scales.
Scales. You always start with scales.
Yeah, most of the time I start with scales. What was it? The ingredients. I remember my old teacher Stephen Doan. Ingredients for a successful practice, and I think that he put chunks of time for, scales, warm-ups, studies, and then your pieces and so on. But I think to start with a scale and mixed bowing patterns is really good. So like, I might do 2 together and 2 separate. And while I'm doing that, I'm not just, am I playing in tune, am I feeling good? I'm really trying to focus on my breathing and my posture. So, everything has to start from a foundational place, that your feet are where you want them to be, that you can stand up, you can sit down, you can feel your sitting bones. And so through these scales, major, minor, melodic and harmonic, and you can do 3 or 4 octaves, I'm really trying to center myself and work on coordination and alignment. Yeah. But all the while, the breathing, coming back to the breathing. Yeah.
I'm thinking about keeping your warm-up fresh. So I think one of the things that I was aware of is that my warming up wasn't scale practice, it was stale practice. Because I would start with the same pattern. I would start with a C major scale, which is wonderful, goes from top to bottom.
Oh, the open strings.
But perhaps, yeah. So that's one of the reasons why you'd start with a C or a G scale.
Yeah, you want to get the resonance going, and you want the depth of the instrument. Yeah. You don't always have to start at the bottom. You can start at the top. Talking about stale, I think it's really important that the practicing doesn't become stale. It's a real opportunity for discovery, and if you're not feeling right, then it's an opportunity to understand why and what you need to do. What is it you need to plan, play, judge? I remember Christopher Bunting in his Craft of Cello Playing manual. There was a mantra.
Yes.
I've heard it in different ways, but so we're thinking subjectively, objectively, as well. So you want to inner listening. I remember Ralph Kirschbaum, my old teacher, one of my teachers, used to talk about the inner listening is really important, that what's coming through you, but also in your practice you have to develop this critical ear, which is feeding back in, so there's a sort of loop, which and once you find your flow with that, I think, and you become friends with the critical ear, that then you have the opportunity to grow, I think, and not become stale, and of course that is also dependent on varying your materials that you use, that you're not just doing the same thing every day, that you can mix that up a bit.
Okay, perhaps a little bit more on these scales. Interestingly, you're thinking about doing bowing the scales in different ways. Do you do since you've done your C major scale, will you move on through into sixths and thirds?
Yeah, absolutely.
And even octaves. So perhaps you
Yeah.
just give us some
I mean,
practical examples of how you vary the scales to.
Yeah, so once you've done your major minor, you know, the intention is I actually move up through all the keys and do different things, whether it's scales or arpeggios or thirds or sixths. But if we look at the good thing about playing two strings at the same time is it demands more energy in the bow. So if we stick with C major, and also I get my back more involved. I'm pulling the sound, pushing the sound. And when you're doing this practice, you can sometimes work at just an even tone, but you can also practice dynamics, which we'll eventually be doing in the repertoire. So you could start kind of lightly at the heavy part of the bow, but because we lose weight and energy out to the tip, we have to create more. So I might practice crescendoing into the tip. And as I develop into the bow change, I'm anticipating. I'm trying to find ways to get ready for the bow change, and so on. So yeah, dynamics even in scales. If I did a minor, so if we did 3 to a bow, I can come away and grow back, or I can develop into the tip. Because what we're doing, we're using our imagination, and we're listening, and we're responding. And it's all this whole connection between the mind, body, and soul, isn't it? And this electrical current that goes into the extremities through the use of our whole being. So some dynamic practice keeps you kind of interested as well. You know.
I find that interesting because as soon as you add dynamic in, you start making real music and making shapes within just simple scales.
Yeah.
But after all, if we're playing a lot of Beethoven, a lot of it's scales in any case with dynamics.
Yes, yeah.
You know, so you know, we're really making music from even in just playing simple scales.
Yeah. So then, if we go into the thirds, you know that somehow, okay, you've got to balance the two strings together, find a good sounding point. And we're training. What I'm trying to do with this is keep the music alive. But I'm also thinking about the frame of the hand and building up a strength and a suppleness. So I need to be quite firm, but I also need to release. And I want the arm and the hand to move as a unit. And I don't want to trap. I just felt then I was trapping a little bit in my upper arm. So I'm thinking, how can I release that? And how's my thumb behaving behind the fingerboard? Is it helping to balance the hand? Are the fingers pivoting? Do I feel balanced in every finger that I'm playing on? And when we go from a closed position to an open position, this extension, which we have to utilize with our playing. I'm trying to really feel this sense of elastic and malleable, like I'm moulding the hand around the harmony. I hope I'm answering your question.
Yes. One of the things I think is really one of the most amazing things about your playing, you use vibrato, I think, better than almost any cellist I know. I mean, and I often quote the Bridge Spring song.
Oh yeah.
You just
go on your cello.
Well, yeah, but go and just, I would say to anybody who's watching this, go and just, it's a 3-minute piece, the Bridge Spring song. Your vibrato is so unbelievably, suits every note. It's so expressive, and it's completely, absolutely appropriate for the emotion on every note. It's a beautiful miniature, but I notice you're using vibrato when you're practicing scales, and would you practice without vibrato, and do you warm up your vibrato? Is that something you do during during your time?
Absolutely.
Are you conscious of?
Yeah, I call it sometimes a vibrato diet when you just use the bow, because the sound is coming from the bow, and it's easy to hide behind vibrato. We want to sound, we want to sound this wonderful, full, rich tone, which the vibrato really helps to enhance the sound. But I learnt very quickly when I was younger that vibrato isn't an automatic part of the sound. I remember Stephen Islis in a masterclass. I just couldn't stop my vibrato. I was just, wanting to make this really vital sound all the time. But as you start to realise that it's really only an embellishment and something that you're adding to the richness which is in the bow.
That is so important.
Yes.
That is so important.
Because you can hide intonation and everything behind vibrato.
Yes.
And I think you have to listen with it more keenly without vibrato. And then when you add the vibrato, you've earned it,
Yes, yeah.
So I do sometimes practice scales without vibrato. That's very important as well. But when you're not vibrating, like for example, I don't want to just feel like I'm stuck and static. I want to feel the left hand is living, and I can actually feel the resonances going through the fingers if you really, listen and think about it. You can feel resonance in the floor, in the fingers. Once I can find it, the intonation. That's really interesting because I'm not only changing the placement of the fingers, I'm also there's bow intonation. So how much pressure you're using and speed and what have you.
Can I just stop you there?
Yeah.
Bow intonation. Would
Yeah.
you like to just explain that a little more?
Yeah, I think that was David Waterman who talked to me about that initially. But basically, when you pull the sound, if I press, there's a chance. I mean, the sound is rising. I mean, it's definitely when you put pressure in the bow and the string, it's going to go up. So I think there's this constant marriage and communication between the hands. Actually, Steve Doan has a Casals crawl exercise, which is quite good for the vibrato, and that's long, short, long, short, long, short, and we're going to develop the vibrato out to the tip. And the vibrato, because you ask, I mean, there's all sorts of exercises you can do for vibrato.
Yes.
But we have to remember that the vibrato in performance, in the way you express yourself, emote, is from the heart. It's something instinctive. But you can practice exercises like, with a metronome or rhythm. I'm sure we've all done this before. And so the oscillation can get more and more excited. And if we train ourselves to be able to do that, then in the heat of the moment, when you're feeling something, you have the technique to find that,
Yes,
I think you never lose separation of the two.
One of the great misconceptions about vibrato is that the finger rolls like so, and that you see a lot of people trying to vibrate like this, particularly when they're starting to learn vibrato. But what you're showing is it's that movement where you're putting if you'd like to just show us very.
You want to keep the joints flexible in the fingers.
Yes. Yeah.
But it's also the motion is in the forearm.
In the forearm.
And it's coming obviously from elsewhere. But the point of contact is the finger with the string. Right,
but it's not a roll. It's not a wrist. It's not a wrist rolling.
Well, it's a very personal thing. You have to find your own way. But I was always trained with feeling the flexibility in the fingers.
Yes.
And the forearm motion, a bit like if you were to do it like a glissando, and maybe it's not such a good thing in playing to do this, but you could hit the shoulder of the cello, and come back, and then eventually rest in the place. But the point is that the forearm is. Yeah, opening and closing
now, you're
from the elbow.
Yes, that's exactly how my warming up starts, is with this, trying to just get this movement in the left hand and doing shifts. And I don't mind if I miss an octave shift or I'm going up tenths. The whole thing to do is not be critical about whether you hit the right note or not. Yeah. It's just to get that feeling of movement with freedom.
Yes.
And in the same way, in a micro way, it's the same in the vibrato. It's just allowing the getting the whole everything in the arm moving.
Yeah.
And sort of pushing the flesh from one side to another in your fingers.
Yeah, and what is it? The percussion. Yeah, the percussion of the fingers. So when the fingers are dropping in your scale practice or in your study practice, whatever, the sense of the finger dropping is going to help to keep the motion of the arm alive. That we're not starting from a static place and adding. It's already the impulse and this current has been not always. Sometimes you want to start vibrato from a very from nothing, but I think that this kind of idea of momentum and we have to find the most natural means possible to be efficient, and so that we can play for as long as we wish. Ultimately. So you're
I
in
was
your
thinking,
flow. Yeah.
perhaps if you'd done a Dvorak concerto or Shostakovich one the night before, part of your warming up will be restorative, and it will be because just simply the amount of lactic acid that goes through your body. And I was thinking, do you do sort of repair practice after you've had a big physical workout the night before?
Reflection. Sometimes even after the performance itself. You
really?
Feel like so bad about something.
You warm down.
You just have to. Yeah, I mean, not always, but sometimes I've found myself let's just play that again and feel better about it. But certainly, warming down is always like athletes. We're athletes, and actually in the morning as well, stretching is just good when you can drop to the floor, let your head hang like in yoga, and gradually bring your spine up to a vertical position, but vertebrae by vertebrae, and that that we're stacking on top of the hips and the neck. We have to remind ourselves to keep the neck free, and that we can use the motion in the head. So the morning after, obviously you've just had a big night of play, so practice isn't always about playing full throttle. I mean, you want to balance your practice with an ease, with whatever you have in the moment. And other days when you're practicing and warming up and then getting into your full practice, you want to play in the spirit of a performance, because you don't want to just be shocked when you've got all the adrenaline and you're in the moment doing that. So it's a constant learning. We should talk a little bit about the manuals. There are lots of warming up manuals. Famously, Kosman, Feuillard. I was brought up in Kosman and Feuillard, and you do use them. The only thing that perhaps you might just refer to this quickly is we have to be mindful that we don't give ourselves some kind of repetitive strain, because a lot of these exercises can be quite painful to listen to as much as to play. So would you just like to demonstrate a few of the Kosman exercises? Well, I mean, I just pulled this out. I mean, it's funny doing this recorded, because this is a very private thing that you want to do on your own. But yeah, these are good again, because we're taking. Actually, before even the Kosman, I do sometimes a hand block, which David Waterman taught me. If you haven't got a huge amount of time, it goes like this. So you do all the intervals within the hand structure. And that's basically looking at different combinations of notes together under the hand. And that's in a block. And then Kosman takes it a bit further. He does one underneath moving. For example. I move up a step for each one, so we're not always in the same place all the time, doing it in the same spot. But I like to kind of, again, so I don't become static. I want to move up a semitone for each one, even though it's not written. And then, I mean, he actually writes the slow over the whole bar. So you could again grow. We're trying to get the independence of the fingers going, and the clarity, there's a bit of synchronizing with, playing one moving part and not the other part. And then he does,
Yeah. Well, I think another important thing is not to always start on the A and the D. Start these exercises at the bottom of the cello.
Exactly. So you go over the D and the G string and the
That's
G
right,
and the C string.
because when you start them off, your left hand gets very tired very quickly, and so you can find often that you have never done them on the C and the G string.
Yes.
So
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And so you could do. You can do them on the other strings, etc.
Yes.
And yeah, another exercise I do. So the Kostman is one, and obviously later you can. You want to get the fingers, so you've done this framework. You then want the fingers to release like springs, so that you're training velocity, independence, clarity, the finger action. So you could warm up to that point. The other exercise I do up high is actually the Starker serial exercises. He does a kind of, because I want to balance the amount of time I practice and warm up down south and up north.
Yes.
So I go this one. Sorry. And you're going across 3 strings. And it keeps going up these half semitone steps. And I get all the way to the top, and that's helping to structure the hand as a unit. The thumb is very important when we get above the 4th position, that the thumb is supporting the fingers. So again, octave work we didn't get onto, but the 3rds, the 6th, the octave work. I want to be sure that I'm remembering that the hand is working as a unit, and that the thumb has an essential role in supporting the fingers, the troops on the way up.
Yes.
It's no thumb in no man's land, which is such a common thing. I think the thumb, whether you're pressing a little bit or you're using arm weight, even if you can release the thumb, it's still there to help shadow the fingers.
Right. Do you have any hints on how to play octaves in tune?
Sometimes if you're lucky.
This is for me.
Yeah. And so, often you hear play the lower octave a bit more. Sometimes I've heard the other way, maybe balance the 2 together. Again, bow intonation. But yeah, like, let's see. Make sure I open the... I want the whole arm to move as a unit from the elbow into the fingers, and I'm really listening to the blend of the sounds with the lower octave and the upper octave, and checking in with both. How much pressure you're putting on one string to the other in the fingers and in the finger and the thumb, and then the bow weight. I hope that's helpful.
That's helpful. Yeah. I can remember when you were playing the Ruggieri cello that it was absolutely pig in the mornings. It was like it didn't want to get out of bed. It took a good half an hour of playing for the cello to be really on song.
Yeah.
And I just
Always,
I was just thinking about the warming up the cello as much as warming yourself up.
Yeah.
And you were talking about the communication between the two. Do you feel that when you take the cello out of the case, it takes half an hour to play
Absolutely, yeah, doesn't it? I mean, I'm always intrigued as to what that magic point is where you really find each other and it's working.
Yes.
And it's very much a relationship. So yeah, I mean, it can take some days longer just to find the sound,
Right.
And then the physical comfort.
Yes.
So absolutely, but then you really feel you've earned it. So at the end of my warm-up, I'm really wanting to start feeling like, once I've gone through all these different rituals, I've got my popper. Every day I do a popper etude. I've been kind of exploring how I play, how I teach with the tortellier.
Yes.
Which has got some really great exercises in. And then most recently, the practice mind. And because we're running out of time, I just thought I would show these by Hans Jensen, which is a fascinating. insight into like practice techniques. It's really important to keep curious and alive to all the discoveries that are still yet to be made, you know. And so we should constantly feel like every day we're starting again, and there's hope for the future. You know, that today you can, you know, practice from one day to the next. The important thing about warm-ups is that they connect. You know, that if you miss a day or two, sometimes it's healthy for you to stop completely, but and maybe not do such intensive work on these exercises. But when you're really wanting to feel yourself in great shape and you know, in a good place with the instrument you're playing, you know, doing these exercises and studies and etudes is an opportunity to get all your good habits going and for you to observe what's happening, so that when you get into the music making, you actually have the time to listen, and subconsciously maybe more so. You're still thinking about what you're doing in your practice. You have to keep listening with a critical ear, but you have a better chance of your body responding to what you're feeling and thinking, because you've been honing all of that in that golden hour, or whatever time that you have in the morning is essential. Yeah.
Well, I have a very good friend who teaches meditation, and he says it's okay to let your mind wander and don't be too hard on yourself. But one thing I feel he has in common with you is that you think and you're very, very thoughtful about how you play the instrument. And I think that is one of the wonderful things about your playing, is it's so well informed on every level. You do a lot of reading about music, the composers, the composition. You try and find the best manuscripts. You put in that kind of thought, but in this little insight into how you warm up, I've certainly taken a lot from it.
Actually, what you just said, I think in the end, you've got to think less and less. This is the great paradox. It's like, you know, on the one hand, you've got to research, you've got to absorb all this stuff, but then you've got to forget, you've got to unlearn in a way, and then remember we're training the knowledge, which we're working on building our knowledge so that it filters into an instinctive reaction to what we're doing, which is the most natural thing to humankind, music. Playing. It's important. We're playing when we warm up, when we practice, when we perform. We're playing. It's you know, it is a serious business, but have fun.
Well, we could have talked, I think, for hours about every single aspect of everything. Fascinating, Guy. So thank you so much, not just to Guy Johnston, but also again to my luthier who have hosted this video. The next presentation coming up will be on Sunday, the 8th of December, 2024 at 5 p.m. And it's entitled Accidents or Accidentals, The Pitfalls of Popper Etude No. 6. So good luck with that. Thank you so much for watching and for supporting London Cello Society. Thank you, Guy.
Thanks, Justin.